Tonight, the fiery moments on Capitol Hill. The head of the Justice Department grilled over Hunter Biden. Attorney General Merrick Garland fiercely defending the DOJ against claims he has weaponized the department, favoring President Biden and his son Hunter while attacking former President Trump. Garland firing back, insisting he is, quote, not the president's lawyer and not Congress's prosecutor. We'll have a full report from the Hill. Plus, the ruling in Hunter Biden's criminal case when he's being ordered to appear in court. An update tonight on that fan who died after getting in a fight in the stands at a Patriots game. What a preliminary autopsy has just revealed about the cause of death, as police and prosecutors are still investigating this case. The deadly neighbor dispute, body cam video showing the moment a Florida man was arrested after shooting his next-door neighbor during an argument over tree trimming. The victim killed in front of his 8-year-old son. The chilling 911 call that shooter's wife made. Mexico halts trains, video showing thousands of migrants packing trains in Mexico as they head to the U.S. border. Tonight, the country's largest freight company suspending service on 60 different routes. Why they're saying these overcrowded trains were putting migrants in grave danger. Medicaid rehab scam. Tonight, Top Story takes an in-depth look at a shocking scheme in Arizona. Native American elders lured off reservations and into fake addiction treatment centers. The harrowing stories from families whose loved ones disappeared and how the state is cracking down. Plus, the terrifying moment a semi-truck crashed into a sedan, igniting a massive fireball. How everyone remarkably made it out alive. And good evening. We begin Top Story tonight with those fiery exchanges on Capitol Hill. Attorney General Merrick Garland grilled for hours today over his handling of the Hunter Biden investigation. The Biden appointee testifying in front of the Republican-led House Judiciary Committee, repeatedly denying accusations that he weaponized the DOJ against former President Trump, while slow-rolling the investigation into the current president's son, saying he is, quote, not the president's lawyer. Garland also insisting he has not interfered in any way with special counsel David Weiss, who is currently investigating Hunter Biden, despite two IRS whistleblowers testifying under oath that Weiss told multiple people he was not in charge. As all of this unfolded in Washington today, a judge in Delaware delivering a blow to Hunter Biden and his legal team, denying his request for a virtual hearing in his gun charges case. How soon he has just been ordered to appear in court. NBC Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles following it all for us and leading us off from Washington.
Tonight, Attorney General Merrick Garland firing back at Republicans accusing him of weaponizing the Justice Department.
I am not the president's lawyer. I will add, I am not Congress's prosecutor. The Justice Department works for the American people.
But Republican lawmakers grilling Garland over what they call a two-tier justice system.
There's one investigation protecting President Biden. There's another one attacking President Trump. Justice Department's got both sides of the equation covered.
The GOP zeroing in on the special counsel investigation of Hunter Biden, alleging Garland was misleading when he said there was no interference in the investigation into the president's son. Garland was pressed if he had any conversations with special counsel David Weiss regarding the case.
I do not intend to discuss internal Justice Department deliberations, whether or not I had them.
So your testimony today is you're not going to tell us whether you've had discussions with Mr. Weiss.
My testimony today is I told the committee that I would not interfere.
Two IRS whistleblowers have testified under oath the DOJ gave preferential treatment to the president's son, and that Weiss told multiple people he was not in charge.
He wanted to bring an action in the District of Columbia, and the U.S. attorney there said, no, you can't. And then you go tell the United States Senate under oath that he has complete authority.
No one had the authority to turn him down.
Weiss has denied the whistleblowers' accounts. Democrats today calling the hearing a political stunt.
This is a gross misuse of your time, your team's time, and our time. It is a shameful circus.
With Garland slamming GOP criticism.
Singling out individual career public servants who are just doing their jobs is dangerous, particularly at a time of increased threats.
All right, Ryan Nobles joins us tonight from Capitol Hill. So, Ryan, I want to start with that news we have tonight. There's been a decision regarding Hunter Biden's request for a virtual hearing.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. And the judge flatly turned him down. Hunter Biden and his attorney suggesting that would actually save the government money by not forcing him to fly across the country to appear in person at his arraignment. The judge said by doing that, it would offer him some level of preferential treatment that he did not deserve. He said the days of virtual arraignments are over in the wake of the COVID pandemic. So Hunter Biden expected to appear in person to answer those gun-related charges, where he's expected to plead not guilty the first week in October, Tom.
And we're going to have much more on Merrick Garland's testimony today and his relationship with the White House. But while you're here, Ryan, I do want to ask you another major headline from Capitol Hill. There's new drama in the negotiations to avoid a potential government shutdown.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. At this point, House Republicans can't seem to come up with an agreement within their own conference that would satisfy this narrow band of conservatives as it relates to spending. And it's really driving the House Speaker Kevin McCarthy nuts. And now, even if they are able to come up with a plan, and McCarthy believes that that could happen in the next couple of days, that plan would still need to pass the Senate, and that is very unlikely. And we are only 10 days away from the government shutting down. Tom?
Okay, Ryan Nobles for us. Ryan, we appreciate all that. And as Garland testified on Capitol Hill, we know his relationship with the White House is also making headlines. Our next guest has written about the relationship between the Biden White House and Garland. The latest article by Aruna Vishwasana is titled "Ties Between Joe Biden and Merrick Garland Deteriorate from Distant to Frigid." She writes that, quote, "The already frosty relationship between President Biden and his Attorney General Merrick Garland is now in a deep freeze." Wall Street Journal senior reporter Aruna Vishwanara, I hope I pronounced that last name right. I'm so sorry. She joins us now. Aruna, thank you for being on Top Story tonight. I first want to ask you, did the collapse of the Hunter plea agreement make the relationship between the DOJ and the Biden administration go even more sour?
Hi, thanks for having me. So, yeah, even as Attorney General Merrick Garland said today, he's not the president's lawyer. They've never sort of been very close. And President Biden, you know, when he picked him 2 years ago to be his attorney general, sort of made that point at the time, like, this is a person I'm putting in charge of the Justice Department that is independent of me, and he doesn't report to me in investigations. He's going to make his own investigative decisions. And what we have heard over the course of the years since then is that the relationship has never sort of grown closer, and it's only grown a bit more distant as some of these decisions have been made. And in particular, in connection with Merrick Garland's decision to appoint a special counsel to examine President Biden's handling of classified documents, and then his decision to appoint this special counsel to continue this investigation into his son. And there is this sense at the White House that, this Hunter Biden investigation didn't have to get to the place it is today. And, the Attorney General, as the person in charge of the department, obviously has some role to play in how that unfolded. And
you write that in the article that respect and admiration for Garland in the Biden administration has shifted to distrust. Is that a fair world because of this special counsel now being appointed?
I wouldn't say it's specifically about the Hunter Biden special counsel, but it is. It's a series of things that has led them to feel a little bit more distrustful. And in particular, the example we heard over and over is this idea that former Vice President Mike Pence similarly found some documents with classified markings in his home and office, turned them over to the Justice Department. The Justice Department looked at this stuff pretty quickly, sort of gave him a clean bill of health and closed the investigation and said, we're not going to pursue this. And what some White House aides feel is that, that the Attorney General sort of took a slightly different tack when a similar set of circumstances occurred with the president. And, he found these documents, his lawyer turns them over to the Justice Department. And instead of trying to close that investigation quickly, the Attorney General does appoint a special counsel to examine that, and that is very much still ongoing. And so it's a confluence of a number of factors, but we have heard that, that there is some level of distrust now at the White House.
Aruna, some people may be watching this and, they may have a tough time believing this. They may think that the White House maybe has been more involved in some of these investigations than people believe. And they may say, oh, this is a perfect example of a story coming out saying that the relationship is distant when maybe the White House is much more involved. In any of your reporting, did you see that there was any type of communication that was not normal happening between the White House and the DOJ?
I mean, I've seen the opposite, and that's almost partly the where the friction is coming in. Merrick Garland has sort of put these very clear, walls sort of between contacts between the Justice Department and the White House about investigations, and there's, almost no contact between the White House and the Justice Department about these investigations. And we heard Merrick Garland today, specifically say, like, I've not taken any. I've never talked to the White House. I haven't taken any direction from the White House about, the Hunter Biden investigation. And, I think what we're seeing is, a little bit of friction coming into play precisely because there's so little.
Finally, Aruna, just remind our viewers, because when you think about President Trump, we know he had a very contentious relationship with Jeff Sessions when he was Attorney General, and then when Bill Barr essentially left towards the end of the term as well. But then you had President Obama, who had a good relationship with his Attorney General, not so much with Bill Clinton. So it kind of depends on the president, right?
Yes, that's totally right. When President Biden came into office, he very much said he wanted to, have a clean break from the Trump administration and the relationship there seemed to be between what the president expected from his attorney general, and he was trying to sort of have a clean break here. But as we can see now in the relationship between Biden and Garland, it's not always as easy as saying you're going to let your attorney general, do what he thinks it's best. It doesn't always work out the way you want it to work.
Aruna Vishwanathan, a very interesting report. You can find it in the Wall Street Journal. We thank you for your time tonight. Next, we turn to the death of that New England Patriots fan who collapsed after a fight at a game this weekend. Initial autopsy results being released today as an investigation continues. This comes as the NFL is facing questions about violent incidents in the stands.
Tonight, with new video and more eyewitnesses coming forward, investigators are trying to figure out how exactly a 53-year-old fan died shortly after being punched in the head at an NFL game on Sunday.
300 level, guy not breathing.
The Norfolk County DA says preliminary autopsy results for Dale Mooney suggest there was no traumatic injury, but a medical issue was identified, not saying what that issue was. Mooney's official cause of death still remains undetermined pending further tests, and the DA's investigation remains ongoing.
This, as we're seeing a new angle with this video obtained by our affiliate WJAR, taken before Mooney collapsed, appearing to show several Dolphins and Patriots fans scuffling. At one point, a man believed to be wearing a Dolphins jersey throwing a punch. Keith Noonan, sitting rows below, says he watched as paramedics tried saving Mooney.
I saw paddles come out, start to get worried. I turned to my son and I said, let's just pray for the best.
So far, no charges have been filed, and connecting the brawl to Mooney's death could be challenging.
There was a death inside the stadium. We still don't know exactly why. Is there a chance for a lawsuit here?
There certainly is a chance, but a plaintiff would have a steep burden here. They'd have to show that the stadium had noticed. They knew that this was a high likelihood and that they failed to take any security measures.
The violent confrontation in Massachusetts, one of several happening during NFL games this week. The league did not respond when asked if they planned on changing any security or safety procedures at upcoming games. The NFL has previously said that one incident was too many, and tonight, loved ones are remembering Dale Mooney as a hard-working family man who leaves behind a wife and 2 sons.
The DA's office says they have examined multiple angles of the video capturing the scuffle prior to Mooney's collapse, but they're also asking anyone who has more video or witnessed that event to please come forward. Okay, we turn now to a shocking story out of Florida. A man, get this, fatally shooting his neighbor after getting into a dispute over tree trimming. The victim's family saying he was shot in front of his 8-year-old son. Stephen Romo has this one.
Hands on top of your head.
Tonight, this police body camera video showing the moment officers arrested a Florida man accused of shooting and killing his neighbor over a tree trimming dispute.
Get in.
78-year-old Edward Druzalowski now charged with second-degree murder in the death of 42-year-old Brian Ford. Ford's family saying he was shot in front of his 8-year-old son. Druzalowski told police Ford was trimming branches on his property when he went up to him with a gun, told him to leave, and then shot him.
was pointing a gun at him at the time to get him off my property.
Right.
And then he kept walking towards me really close, so I shot him.
Druzilowski's wife calling 911 after hearing those shots fired.
My husband took his gun, but I think he meant to scare him, and I think he killed him.
He killed your neighbor?
I think so. He's not moving.
Despite life-saving efforts by police, Ford died on the scene. His mother recalling the shocking moments.
I saw Ed over my son's body. I didn't see my son's body, just the tree limbs, so he was in the tree limbs with a gun facing right towards his chest.
She says her 8-year-old grandson, Ford's child, is traumatized.
And he was screaming. He shot my dad. He wanted to go over and lay on top of his dad's body.
Court will currently hold you on no bond.
Druzilowski is now being held in jail without bond. His court-appointed attorney argued for his release due to lack of prior criminal history. The prosecutor, though, argued that Druzilowski said Ford did not have any weapons in his hand and did not threaten him at any time. He's yet to enter a plea. Legal experts saying this would be a difficult case to use a stand-your-ground defense.
Stand your ground protects people who are acting lawfully where they stand. It does not give anyone a full license to draw their firearm and shoot someone they're having an argument with.
Tom, according to a police report, Druzilowski said he never had any type of verbal or physical confrontations at all with Ford, but he felt more comfortable approaching him with a gun. Now, his next court appearance is set for about 3 weeks from now. Tom?
Okay, Stephen Romo for us. Stephen, we appreciate that. We head to Mexico now, and the historic move by a major freight train company suspending service on dozens of train lines after hundreds of migrants were seen hitching rides to the U.S. border. 6 migrants were injured or killed trying to ride on the trains, and it comes as the number of migrants trying to cross the southern border is climbing once again. Guad Venegas has the story and the video.
Tonight, a common yet dangerous transport option for migrants heading to the U.S. border shut down. New images from Mexico's largest freight company, Ferromex, showing hundreds of migrants riding freight trains in what the operator calls a social and humanitarian issue. The company taking unprecedented action, announcing it is halting service on 60 different trains, the same train system that has routes to major destinations bordering U.S. cities like El Paso, Eagle Pass, and Nogales, leaving large groups of migrants stranded near the tracks.
Nosotros vamos a continuar el viaje. De hecho, estamos esperando el tren. Accidentes, sí he escuchado que han habido, pero no como lo dice la gente, que tantos accidentes así.
The company says in the last few days, as many as 1,500 migrants, including families with children, have been riding the trains north, resulting in half a dozen injuries and deaths. This morning, Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador speaking out about the company's service suspension.
No, lo que nos importa no son los trenes, nos importa los migrantes.
The move comes as the number of migrants apprehended at the border is increasing after dropping earlier this year. 2 Homeland Security officials telling NBC News more than 7,500 migrants were taken into custody along the border this Sunday alone, a surge that is being felt in cities like Eagle Pass in Texas, where today the mayor signed an emergency declaration asking the federal government for funding to reimburse the emergency services the city has used to deal with the influx.
It has taken a toll on our local resources, specifically our police force and our fire department. They have had to answer many calls because of this influx of people coming in.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection saying tonight they are encouraged by the Ferromex train shutdown, emphasizing that the border is not open as they brace for another potential increase of migrants.
Guad Venegas joins us tonight from Miami. Guad, migrants have been using these trains, we know, to hitch rides for decades. We saw the trains also in action, covered with migrants during Title 42. Why is the company deciding to stop the trains now?
Tom, the migrants have been using the train for decades. In fact, they've named it the Beast or La Bestia because of the dangers that come from riding that train. The Mexican president was wondering exactly the same thing. Why did they decide to stop services now? So a spokesperson with Ferromex told us that the reason why they're doing it now is because of the unprecedented number of migrants. So essentially, they're seeing more migrants than ever before, and that's why they made the decision to stop the trains. Now, Tom, moving forward, we have to see what kind of effect effects this is going to have on commerce, because these are trains that are bringing products to the United States. So now there's going to be an effect on all of those products that are not making their way to the border.
Yeah, an important point. Okay, Juan Venegas, Juan, we appreciate it. We turn now to power and politics in the race for 2024. Donald Trump under attack from leaders in his own party. The former president speaking out against Florida governor and rival presidential candidate Ron DeSantis' signing of a 6-week abortion ban in an interview with Kristen Welker.
I mean, DeSantis is willing to sign a 5-week and 6-week ban.
Would you support that? You think that goes too far?
I think what he did is a terrible thing and a terrible mistake.
Those comments now raising questions about whether or not Trump's take on restrictive abortion bans may cost him ground in the primaries. To break down this abortion battle and what it means for the race for the White House, Vaughn Hilliard joins us tonight now from Dubuque, Iowa. Vaughn, thanks for joining Top Story. So Governor DeSantis already passed this bill in Florida. He addressed Trump's comments in a radio interview earlier this week. I want to play it for our viewers. Here's what he had to say.
Protecting babies with heartbeats is not terrible. Donald Trump may think it's terrible. I think protecting babies with heartbeats is noble and just, and I'm proud to have signed the heartbeat bill in Florida.
So, Vaughn, put this into perspective for us. Clearly, the battle lines have been drawn over abortion, and it seems like the former president was playing the long game, sort of catering his comments to a general election audience and not to that primary audience, especially where you are in Iowa.
Right, and that's why here up on the stage in Iowa just a few moments ago, he made the case that none of these state pieces of legislation would have been able to go into effect, including the likes of Florida, if it were not for him having served in the White House and nominating 3 conservative Supreme Court justices who ultimately overturned Roe v. Wade. He made the comments in that interview with Kristen Welker that it was a terrible mistake, the 6-week piece of legislation that was enacted by Ron DeSantis. But when you are the Florida governor and other Republicans in this race, particularly in a state like Iowa, where 2/3 of voters here, Republican voters, identify themselves as evangelicals, they see an opening. They have not gone on the attack against him on his 4 indictments or the events around January 6th largely, but on this policy issue, they feel that this is an opening for them to really tell voters that Donald Trump, if he were to serve another term in the White House, he would not be as conservative as a president as, say, a Ron DeSantis or a Mike Pence would be.
And Iowa's Republican Governor Kim Reynolds, we know, adding to that pile-on yesterday, tweeting, we'll put this up on the screen here, it's never a terrible thing to protect innocent life. I'm proud of the fetal heartbeat bill the Iowa legislature passed and I signed in 2018 and again earlier this year. Very few elected officials have been openly critical of the former president. We're talking about Trump here. What does it say that these two are coming out strong against Trump? And I actually think it speaks a lot to that relationship between Iowa's governor and former President Trump.
It's arguably the most important relationship in this primary caucus process. Of course, January 15th, we are less than 4 months away from the Iowa caucus. The Republican governor here in the state usually stays neutral, doesn't endorse a candidate in a competitive Republican primary. Donald Trump has been openly critical of Kim Reynolds for not backing his candidacy. But look who just 2 months ago signed her own 6-week abortion ban. It was Kim Reynolds here in the state of Iowa. And that is why her tweet was so notable, because she was, without naming him directly, calling out the former president for his position and his critical remarks of Ron DeSantis.
You know, Vaughn, I want to ask you, we had some reporting, as you know, from NBC News last week that the Trump field game, the field team, I should say, in Iowa is not as effective as maybe it could be. You and I covered 2016. We know that former President Trump, all he needed back then was a Twitter account and a microphone. He didn't really have much of a campaign, but this time it might be a little different. What are you seeing and hearing from voters there?
Right, and you remember 8 years ago, Tom, he was galvanizing thousands of folks here in Iowa to his rallies. And, you know, his campaign team here on the ground, they were passionate, and they were getting folks to sign these commit to caucus cards. But, you know, I'm told, though, in the closing days, they struggled to get the word out to those very voters through phone and email to actually come in caucus. And that is how Texas Senator Ted Cruz was able to beat Donald Trump here in the state by 3 points. Much of the operation around Ted Cruz 8 years ago is now around the likes of Ron DeSantis DeSantis. And that is where some of these other campaigns see an opening. I'm told that everybody on Trump's Iowa operation today, they are new. They are not the same team as 8 years ago. And they recognize that they need to have a more formidable reach out effort than they did 8 years ago. And Donald Trump himself on stage here this afternoon, he said that he learned his own lessons from 8 years ago. And if Donald Trump, let's be clear, if Donald Trump wins the state of Iowa, it's going to be tough for any other Republican to beat him, because new polling out of New Hampshire shows him up with a sizable, nearly 30-point lead. And in South Carolina, he has just about the same advantage here. So Iowa is critical. And again, we're just less than 4 months away now, Tom.
Vaughn Hilliard on the campaign trail again tonight. Vaughn, thank you. Still ahead tonight, an urgent manhunt for a suspected murderer in Indiana. The inmate accidentally released because of a clerical error? Where that suspect could be tonight and how officials are defending the decision to wait 6 days to alert the public. Plus, danger at the front door, an Amazon driver attacked by a rattlesnake in Florida. How they're doing tonight. And the announcement from the Biden administration on free COVID tests. How soon they'll be available and how many you can get. Top story, just getting started on this Wednesday. We're back now with an urgent manhunt underway in Indiana after a fugitive murder suspect got out of jail, not by escaping, but because authorities released him by mistake. Emily Aketa picks up the story from there.
Tonight, the search is ramping up for a murder suspect who authorities mistakenly let walk free from an Indianapolis detention center just 2 days after he was arrested.
This was an error. This should have not happened.
Law enforcement now making a plea for the public's help in finding 28-year-old Kevin Mason. They waited 6 days to alert the community of his accidental release. A tactical move, they say, as authorities covertly tailed Mason's girlfriend, today arresting her for assisting a criminal.
We thought it was to our advantage to follow her until we find where they have him.
Last week, Mason was arrested in Indiana on 3 warrants out of Minnesota related to homicide, a parole violation, and firearms possession. The Marion County Sheriff's Office says one of their clerks thought she was correcting duplicate bookings and lifted 2 holds in the inmate's file. The mistake was not caught before a clerk in Minnesota lifted the final hold when authorities waived extradition there. Residents in the area now left on edge.
It upsets me that it puts the community in danger. And I can only hope that he's found soon.
I think they have a responsibility to keep us safe.
The surge comes on the heels of a massive manhunt that blanketed Philadelphia suburbs. Convicted killer Daniello Cavalcante evaded hundreds of officers for nearly 2 weeks after crab walking out of jail. Now in Indianapolis, another multi-agency manhunt as the sheriff's office vows to tighten its protocols and announces the termination of 2 clerks.
I'd rather no one get out of jail that's much less one charged with murder.
Authorities believe Mason is still in Indianapolis and acknowledge that he's had practice evading law enforcement, having been on the run since a deadly shooting back in 2021. Tom?
Okay, Emily, we appreciate that. When we come back, lucky to be alive. Video capturing the moment a semi-truck slammed into a sedan. How everyone involved somehow survived this fiery collision. All right, we're back now with Top Stories news feed, and we begin with the Amazon driver in serious condition after a snake bite in Florida. According to police, the driver was dropping off a package near Palm Beach when she was bitten on the back of her leg by a highly venomous eastern diamondback. That driver immediately became ill but managed to call out for help. Officers warning residents to keep an eye out for this type of rattlesnake. 2 drivers lucky to be alive after a terrifying crash at a Minnesota intersection. A traffic cam capturing the moment a Chevy Impala slams into a semi-truck in Steele County. See it here. The truck dragging the sedan before it burst into flames. The semi going off the road and onto its side. Both drivers taken to the hospital but are okay. State Patrol says seatbelts likely saved both their lives. And the Biden administration will restart a program that provided free COVID tests to American households. The White House announcing $600 million in funding to produce new at-home tests. The Department of Health and Human Services will also relaunch the website at the bottom of your screen, where people can order up to 4 free tests starting on September 25th. It comes amid a spike in cases and hospitalizations nationwide. Now to an NBC News exclusive. New reporting shows that President Biden's aides have asked the U.S. ambassador to Japan, Emanuel, to stop posting messages on social media taunting Chinese President Xi Jinping. For more on this, I want to bring in Courtney Kuby. She helped break this story and joins us now from the Pentagon. So, Courtney, Ambassador Emanuel, who used to be the mayor of Chicago and worked for a long time with former President Clinton, has always been very outspoken, and he has a firm understanding of what's happening in the world. So what's exactly at play here, and why was he tweeting this?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, as you said, he's been outspoken, and he also has had a past of some vitriolic language as part of his outspokenness. But he certainly understands. He has a long history in politics. He certainly understands the implications of some of these tweets, including the fact that right now the Biden administration is really trying to mend relations with China. Now, we've seen a couple of high-level meetings between Biden administration officials and Chinese officials, including that visit by Secretary of State Antony Blinken over the summer to China. All of this is expected to be teeing up a possible meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and President Joe Biden, most likely in November at the APEC summit. So the fact that Ambassador Emanuel, has been tweeting these things that are potentially provocative to President Xi Jinping and to China overall, it's just not been sitting well with members of the Biden administration. That's what led to them telling him he needs to tone it down, Tom.
Yeah, I want to circle back to the why, but what has happened since we broke this story? We know that he's sort of in a Twitter timeout now, so the ambassador is not going to be tweeting anymore?
Well, not so much that he won't be tweeting, but we're told, according to officials, that those tweets, if they deal with issues with China, will be coordinated larger. So places like the Pentagon here, the White House, perhaps State Department, he will have some officials who will most likely be looking at them to make sure that the message is consistent with what the Biden administration is trying to put out for China.
Ambassador Emanuel has also had a long, I would say, good relationship with President Biden as well. And again, he understands the world, and he's been in politics for a long time. I got to think there was a reason why he was putting out those tweets as the ambassador to Japan. I mean, he was putting them out there for the public. Of course, he's going to know other countries in that region, including China, are going to be seeing them.
Yeah, and so you hit the nail right on the head of one of our big reporting questions when we first started looking into this. And that is, was there someone in the administration that was sort of egging him on? Was there any effort here for Rahm Emanuel to put these tweets out to send a message to China? And frankly, we spoke with a number of officials about that, and we just couldn't find that to be the case. On the contrary, the people we talked to said that his tweets got more and more attention in the Pentagon, at the State Department, at the White House, as they became more and more potentially provocative to China. And that, in fact, that was when there was this discussion and a decision to have someone in the administration talk to him and say, you need to tone some of these things down. Now, I do believe, according to the officials, we will still see Ambassador Emanuel tweeting about things, including about China, but we should expect it to be a more consistent message with what the Biden administration is trying to put out as part of this mending of relations between the two countries.
Okay, Courtney Kuby. Courtney, we appreciate it. Now to more of our coverage from the UN this week and new warnings about the global threat of climate change and the need for governments to respond. Greece on the front lines of this climate crisis with unprecedented flooding and wildfires this summer. We've shown you some of those images. NBC's Keir Simmons went there to see the catastrophic impact and has a story for us tonight.
Ferocious wildfires, scorching heat waves and devastating storms. Southern Europe endured a summer of extreme weather. Greece was on the front line. So hot some days, the Acropolis was closed. Fires ripped through forests, while a Mediterranean hurricane unleashed the worst floods since records began. Greece's Prime Minister telling us climate change is a formidable challenge.
It's a war we have to fight with an enemy we cannot. Sometimes we cannot avoid, sometimes we can contain.
We left Athens, travelling along the stunning coastline to a different Greece, in the central region of Thessaly. Here, floodwater left entire towns, villages and farms submerged after dams and rivers burst their banks. Residents stranded on rooftops without assistance, food or water, they say, for 2 days. 17 people were killed. 7 days after the storm hit, this is what we found in the town of Palamas. homes destroyed. Here, the wall of a bedroom ripped off. Those with homes still standing, left with little else. We meet Georgia, weeping at what's left of her home, one of her few belongings saved, a wedding photo with her late husband. My daughter and grandson almost drowned, she says. We make it to neighbouring Marathia, cut off for days.
Just yesterday, this village was underwater, and still now, every street looks like a river. 500 people lived here. Now, almost everyone has gone.
This woman and her dog stayed.
You've been trapped in the house all this time. You've stayed in the house all this time.
They didn't want to leave. We didn't want to leave.
Everywhere, cars are abandoned, houses are ruined. This is Soteres, this is his house. Is there anything left?
Nothing, only the walls.
There is anger here, not about the changing climate, but about the official response, or lack of it, they say.
But they could tell us to save our life earlier.
They could have given you a warning?
Yes. We just woke up in the water.
This local union boss has come with clean water and condemnation for the government.
They don't care about the people. They only care about the big multinationals.
So you blame the government more than climate change?
Of course. Because climate change is global.
We drove 400 miles to where a wildfire larger than New York City burnt out of control for over 2 weeks. Europe's largest ever recorded wildfire. Even within Greece, climate change is impacting different places in vastly different ways. Here in mountainous Evros, charred tree trunks lined the roads for miles upon miles. Environmentalist Theodora Skartsi, who has spent her life protecting the rare birds of prey in this nature reserve, says dry conditions blamed on climate change were just one factor. She says many local people have left who used to look after the forest and fight fires.
We haven't prepared for climate change.
For sure, we are not prepared.
We've made it worse.
While migrants pass through from Turkey, lighting fires that could have started a blaze.
It's by accident, not by purpose. But because of the high number, that we cannot predict it, how many they are, the risk is very high.
18 migrants died in the fires this summer. Volunteer firefighter Christos Sianaferis helped tackle the blaze, saving his livestock.
These were your animals here.
Yes.
What was it like?
Very bad.
Yeah?
Very bad in the fire.
Like so many, he blames officials. The authorities didn't listen to people who know the forest, he says. We predicted this 4 or 5 days earlier, he told me. Greece's leading climate scientist says governments need to adapt quickly. Their civil protection programs not adequate for the new global reality of extreme weather.
It's biblical. Floods and fires.
It is. But without having Noah's Ark.
What is Noah's Ark for you in Greece?
Noah's Ark would be a preparation for such big disasters. Prevention.
To prepare properly.
To prepare properly.
This summer, Greece and many Mediterranean countries suffering, and for governments everywhere, a warning of things to come.
Keir Simmons joins us now live in studio. So, Keir, I'm watching these images in your story, and it just reminds me of what we've seen across the United States.
Yeah.
So you're seeing this in Europe as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the question is, what can we learn from Greece?
Yeah. Well, I think we can learn from Greece that climate change and extreme heat happens in the context of many other things. So you heard about those wildfires. There were many other reasons why those fires started and why they burned so badly. There's that impact. And then the consequences. So one person there told us, after the fires, our worry now will be the floods, the consequences financially. Greece has asked for $2 billion from Europe just to deal not with climate change, but with the consequences of climate change.
But something that is familiar to us here in the U.S., the people there in Greece were distrustful of their government. They didn't think they were going to take care of them. Essentially, is that what it is?
That's exactly right. And again, it's another point, isn't it? You can't assume that people hit by some of the consequences of climate change are necessarily going to blame climate change itself. So many people were reaching out for people to blame and really reaching out towards officials and things. And again, the consequences. You saw me there speaking to the Greek Prime Minister. He said, listen, please don't tell people that Greece is suffering too badly in the places where we want people to take vacations, because then it'll hit us harder again. It's still a fantastic place.
We're seeing something like a story like that in Hawaii happening right now.
Exactly.
Okay, Keir, thank you for that. Now for a check of other headlines around the world, which means it's time for Top Stories Global Watch. 2 powerful tornadoes devastating parts of eastern China. Video shows one of the funnel clouds touching down, sending debris flying to the area and toppling power lines. Look at that. At least 10 people killed and more than 130 homes damaged. Responders using cranes to repair buildings and conduct rescue work. And an update on a story we brought you last week. Mexican music star Peso Pluma has canceled his concert in Tijuana after receiving death threats from a cartel. In a message on social media, the artist saying he is canceling the October show in an effort to protect fans, his team, and everyone involved. As we've reported, banners threatening his life appeared around Tijuana and nearby cities signed with the initials of a cartel. Peso Pluma has not directly commented on those threats. Okay, coming up, the disturbing details behind a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme in Arizona. Scammers targeting Native Americans that have addiction issues and luring them to fake rehab centers. Medicaid billed millions of dollars, and some of the victims missing or even found dead. The advocates and survivors now taking to the streets to try and stop this. Stay with us. We're back now with details on a widespread fraud scheme in Arizona. State and federal authorities say scammers are luring vulnerable Native Americans into fake rehab centers, then billing Medicaid millions in fraudulent claims. The illicit businesses promise treatments, but some check in and end up missing, assaulted, or even dead. Officials now trying to crack down, and our Valerie Castro spoke to those at the center of the crisis.
These are the faces of missing Indigenous people across the Southwest, many of them believed to be victims of a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme in Arizona, where people are brought to fake addiction treatment programs, according to the state's attorney general.
Why is my Che getting in your truck?
The man recording this video says he was suspicious of this truck pulled over on the side of the road in Gallup, New Mexico, the gateway to the Navajo Nation.
They're taking you to a safe house, aren't they?
The man in the denim jacket, a Navajo elder. Police believe the driver and passenger were trying to lure the man to an addiction treatment facility, most likely in the Phoenix area.
I have my business card. If you have any question, go to me. Okay?
Several law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, say tactics like these set up a false promise of safe haven and treatment while defrauding the state Medicaid system. The elder eventually gets out of the truck, persuaded in Navajo. But many are trafficked from reservations and encouraged to sign up for Medicaid benefits in Arizona.
We were hearing reports of these vehicles that were going, people were going onto the tribal communities and recruiting people that were impaired in the communities, and then they weren't being seen for weeks on end.
The so-called rehab facilities often lacking in care and in some cases allegedly fueling addictions to attract more clients.
There are some that have ties to illegal drug organizations and others that are other operators are opportunists.
And the more clients, the more reimbursement from the Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System, or ACCESS.
There are multiple crimes that are occurring, anywhere from assaults, sexual assaults, trespassing, burglary, and even deaths.
Reva Stewart has heard the horror stories through her outreach group. She remembers first noticing strange vehicles outside her Phoenix business approaching people at the bus stop.
And I asked him, I said, can I ask you why that van stopped and asked you something? And he was like, yeah, they asked me if I needed a place to go.
Now aware of the scam, she's taken a grassroots approach to the problem, helping people, she says, who've been left without any resources, still battling addiction and ashamed or unable to find their way home.
We have seen hundreds of unsheltered relatives that have been in these sober living homes. We've seen elderly that have gotten beaten up by these people in these homes. Women have told us they've gotten raped.
Raquel Moody, one of Stewart's outreach partners, says she experienced these facilities firsthand as she battled an addiction to alcohol along with a relative.
There was no staff. The clients, my brother, he was allowed to drink. It was really hard because You know, at times I didn't feel safe.
Moody says she moved around to several similar facilities, hoping to find real treatment while her brother disappeared. When he was eventually found, it was too late.
So he died December 11th of 22. So we were looking for him for about 6 months. But I know that being sober was what he wanted. Because we actually talked. We had a conversation before, you know, he left.
Now Stewart and Moody go out at night providing food and water, checking on those who appear to be in need, and questioning anyone driving a vehicle they feel is suspicious.
Can I get the license plate number?
So you see this consistently. You know, they're still recruiting to this day.
The state's Medicaid program cracking down on the fraud in May, announcing a 6-month moratorium on the enrollment of new clinics and implementing safeguards to weed out the fake facilities. Law enforcement agencies at every level coordinating to investigate.
In one case, we discovered that Access had been billed for more than 13 hours a day for alcohol rehabilitation services to a 4-year-old.
The governor's office estimating the state has lost hundreds of millions of dollars in the scheme.
This is one of the biggest scandals in the history of the state of Arizona.
Access reports more than 300 fake or fraudulent providers have been suspended, including the clinic Mariah Benally worked at, allegedly entangled with a sister facility receiving fraudulent payments.
So there was billing that was happening for patients who weren't receiving those services from our company or from any company at all.
Benally now speaking out after losing her own brother to addiction.
It matters to me because, you know, losing a loved one to everything that's going on right now with this, you trust these facilities with your loved ones. So if anything, I know the pain.
And you can hear her pain right there. Valerie Castro joins us now on set. So Valerie, I guess when you see this report, you have to ask yourself, how were so many of these facilities able to pop up and why haven't they been shut down?
So Access is the state agency that oversees the funding to these facilities. They tell us that this all happened during the course of the pandemic. So many people needed mental health treatment, addiction treatment services. So it wasn't unusual to have a lot of these facilities opening up. But of course, some people took advantage of it. Now they say to shut them down, they need a credible allegation of fraud that starts that investigation. But it's a delicate process because they don't want to inadvertently shut down a place that really is helping someone, that is a real legitimate treatment center.
That does it for us tonight. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Stay right there. More news on the way.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.